at the specified time. You were there day before yesterday, and you were there uh, day before yesterday and yesterday, and this will be continuing as I have already told you over the next 2 months. And after this week, next week we'll be covering retina, after which it will be followed by glaucoma and all other topics pan ophthalmology. I'm very grateful to Dr. Love who has given his time. I'm also very grateful to Dr. Kunal. I'd like to request, and most of all, I'm very grateful to Intas Pharmaceuticals for making this all um, available for the postgraduates. It's going to be a big and very good learning tool for all the postgraduates, and I hope you all make the best use of it. And as you are aware, there's a chat box in between. You can ask questions. Dr. Love can stop and answer your questions. At the end of the presentation, also, you can ask questions. And if anything is there, I'll write down my email. Dr. Love can write down his email, and you can ask him questions directly also at a later time. We will also have the YouTube link, which will be put up by Manish Gupta ji in between of the presentations which were done day before yesterday and yesterday. So you can see the class on refraction and assessment of squint which was done yesterday. You can see it on YouTube, and all these classes that are happening, you will be able to see on YouTube also for a few days. I would like to request Dr. Love Kochgave to please start now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Satyajit. So we will start with where we left yesterday. One doubt was left uncleared, which was a ARC and eccentric fixation. So what happens many times when you're doing the cover test, then you don't get any movement of the eye, but there is a obvious squint. So there are two possibilities there, which one is anomalous retinal correspondence and second is eccentric fixation. And eccentric fixation could be due to some pathology in the retina, and the extrafoveal part has taken up the fixation, and to hazy vision, some hazy vision is maintained due to that extrafoveal fixation. So we cannot do anything about it. But at the same time, if there is a prolonged squint, and in those children, if they take a extrafoveal fixation, that is called anomalous retinal correspondence. Vision will not be as clear as the foveal fixation, but will maintain some vision. And that can be reversed sometimes with the synaptophore and vision therapy treatment, in which foveal stimulation is done. And slowly, if the child goes back to foveal fixation, then on cover test also you will start getting squint, and that can be corrected later. Okay. And what do you mean by no movement can also mean amblyopic? No, that can mean, but again, in that case, the vision will be very, very poor. See, if you have some useful vision and then there is no movement, see, for cover test, the criteria is 660 or better. So if the child is having 660 or better vision and then there is no movement on cover test, that could be due to anomalous retinal correspondence. So let us start today's presentation, and that is esotropia. Are the slides visible? Slide is visible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Not yet. Not yet. I can't see.
You cannot see.
Site visible, sir.
Visible, sir.
Full screen.
Yeah, site
Yeah, visible.
slides are visible.
Yes. So today we will be covering esotropia, and mainly the concomitant esotropia in children. So why is it so important? Because
Have not taken off yet, and which is why API Institute decided that will take up a PG program in which postgraduate. But verbal children this in
Sir, I'm
congenital
muting all. You can mute your mic.
Dr. Love, you can unmute your mic now.
Now, why esotropia in children is important? Because it can be of various etiology and can be mostly vision threatening, but very rarely can be life threatening also. Esotropia in children and especially in infants is strongly embryogenic, so we need to treat that early. When you compare this with the intermittent exotropia, this is a much more serious condition because the chances of dense amblyopia and faster amblyopia is much higher in esotropia. Satisfying results if managed at correct time and aggressively. That is the most important thing. Why it is important? Because if we delay the management of esotropia, then we may not get the same result as we normally get with aggressive treatment. So common esotropia, what the commonest is the infantile esotropia syndrome. Then other types may be a nystagmus blockade syndrome, the Ciancia syndrome, accommodative and refractive and non-refractive, acute comitant esotropia, and Duane syndrome. Some of them are the differential diagnosis of infantile esotropia. So let us come to the most important and most common type of esotropia in children. That is the infantile esotropia. Incidence, as you can see here, I don't have the reference of this, but it is 1% of the normal newborns. It is 4 times more common in children with stormy neonatal history. As we had done in the squint evaluation yesterday, stormy neonatal history or perinatal history is very important for any child examination of the eye of the child, and can present as squint, and many times they have a pale optic disc, and it has a spectrum of anomalies apart from esotropia. We'll discuss risk factors. Sometimes it is genetic, then in premature children, low birth weight. Again, that comes in stormy perinatal period. Maternal smoking and alcohol abuse also has been shown to be associated with infantile esotropia. This slide is very important because again, infantile esotropia is a cluster of signs. It is not the only the squint. So please be careful about this slide. Every point is important here. The angle of the squint is large. It is quite a large angle squint, and generally not much of refractive error. So what we get in accommodative esotropia is generally absent in infantile esotropia. Then onset is early, but very rarely at birth, but it's quite early onset first few months of life. And there is a apparent abduction deficit. So can someone tell why? You can just unmute your mic and tell. Why do we see abduction deficit in infantile esotropia? Because many of these children present have a phenomena called cross fixation. Like if there is esotropia, the right eye is fixing towards the left side, left eye is fixing towards the right side, and that gives a false appearance, false impression that there is abduction deficit. So when we cover one of the eyes of the child, then you will see the movement has reappeared. So that is more due to cross fixation than actual abduction deficit. Latent nystagmus is a very common association of esotropia. How do we diagnose latent nystagmus? Suppose the child is having squint and no nystagmus. When we are doing cover test and when we cover one of the eyes of the child, then the nystagmus will appear. That's called latent nystagmus. There is another term called latent manifest nystagmus. Suppose the child is having nystagmus and we cover one of the eyes, then if the intensity of nystagmus increases, that is called latent manifest nystagmus. And sometimes these children also have a head posture along with the infantile esotropia. And another more very quite common association of infantile esotropia is inferior oblique overaction and dissociated vertical deviation. How do we assess the inferior oblique overaction? It's superior and nasal quadrant. When the eye is moving up significantly in the superior and nasal quadrant, then that will be a inferior oblique overaction. And if inferior oblique overaction is present, then generally it is associated with V phenomena. And same way, when superior oblique overaction is there, that may be associated with A phenomena. And another sign what we see in infantile esotropia is dissociated vertical deviation. What do we mean with dissociated vertical deviation? Like when we are doing the cover test, and when you uncover, you will see that the covered eye has moved up, and the recovery is a very slow downward and inward movement. That is called dissociate. Why is it dissociated? Because only one eye is moving up. That is why it is dissociated. And vertical deviation is vertical. It goes vertically. One eye goes vertically, and there is no movement of the other eye. And what I told earlier, other feature is cross fixation. Then vertical incompetence. Sometimes you will see that the vertical movement is less. V pattern definitely associated with inferior oblique overaction. And many of these children will have amblyopia. So we need to assess which is the unmaintained eye and do a amblyopia therapy aggressively before we go for surgery. So first we have to start with patching and then plan to go for surgery. Now, how do we diagnose, or what is the differential diagnosis of this? One can be a rare possibility, which is a early onset accommodative esotropia. So how will we differentiate that? The difference between the two is, one is the infantile esotropia is a very large angle esotropia. Accommodative may not be that large angle. That is one. Second is infantile esotropia may not be associated with high hyperopia. Most of the time it is not associated. But in early onset accommodative esotropia, the child may be having high hyperopia, and when you give the spectacles, the eyes become straight. So that is called infantile early onset accommodative esotropia. Second is pseudo esotropia. So I'm sure most of you would be aware of this. When the child is born, most of them will have some flattened nasal bridge and some telecanthus, which slowly improves as the child grows. So that gives an appearance of esotropia, which is not exactly squint. And that can be, how do we differentiate that with infantile? The Hirschberg test, you will get a central pupillary torchlight reflex in both the eyes. So we are sure that it is a pseudoesotropia. Third is Duane syndrome. We have discussed Duane syndrome yesterday, so I'm sure most of you would be knowing. How do we now? This is confusing because even in, why is Duane syndrome confusing with infantile esotropia? Due to cross fixation, because infantile esotropia is having cross fixation, so we may get an impression that there is no lateral movement. So when we in Duane's, when we close one of the eye, that then also that lateral movement will not go. That is one point. And in medial movement, the eye will get retracted inwards. So that is how you differentiate a Duane's with infantile esotropia. Then fourth is lateral rectus paresis, again due to the cross fixation phenomena. So how do we again differentiate? Close one of the eye, infantile esotropia, the ocular movement will become normal, but not in lateral rectus paresis. And lateral rectus paresis is seen in children also many times after a episode of fever, viral fever, or something like that. So that generally improves by itself without any intervention. And there are some other functional deficits which is not very important at your level. I'll skip this. And then how do we treat these children? I hope the diagnosis part is clear. So next we come to treatment of of infantile esotropia. First, most important, the rule is that any esotropia, even with small hyperopia, we have to give full hyperopic correction. So infantile esotropia, if they are presenting with small hyperopia also, first you have to give them the spectacles and then reassess the squint angle with the spectacle on. Second, before we operate is treat amblyopia. We have to do patching for me first. It has to be initiated and done for a few months, and then we go for surgery. It's not, yes, surgery is important. Early surgery is important in infantile esotropia, but never without initiating the patching therapy. If there is amblyopia, if there is unmaintained fixation of any one of the eye, then amblyopia therapy has to be started first, and then surgical alignment has to be done. Third is surgery. Again, there are various surgical options available that we'll discuss, either bimedial recession or medial rectus recession and lateral rectus resection of the same eye. Both can be done. And if it is associated with inferior oblique overaction, then we do inferior oblique recession as well. And inferior oblique recession, if done, has to be done in both eyes for good results. And follow-up care for amblyopia therapy. That is very important. The role of alternate occlusion, again, because sometimes when we are buying time for surgery and we are not sure about which eye is amblyopic, and if we feel that both eye are equally fixing equally, then we can give alternate eye occlusion. That is more because of the cross fixation, because a constant state of cross fixation may lead to fibrosis of the medial rectus if it has not been broken regularly, because that is always in the contracted state. So till we do the surgery, we can give alternate eye patching in these children. But the result of the same does not, the alternate eye patching doesn't help with the post-operative results if there is no amblyopia. So why we are doing patching is just to keep the eyes mobile before the surgery if the child is not amblyopic. Now, the important part of the management is the surgery. Again, early alignment is desirable, and the consensus is that it should not be beyond 2 years of age, as early as possible, but not beyond 2 years of age for infantile esotropia. Then the amblyopia that may set in will be very dense and difficult to treat later on. And most important, apart from the amblyopia, the fusion and stereopsis will get lost forever if we don't operate early in these children. And the common surgery in this is bimedial recession. So both the medial rectors are weakened so that the eyes become parallel. And what is the desirable result of the surgery? Either a straight or a microtropia up to maybe esotropia of maybe 4 to 6 or maximum up to 8 diopters. 10 to 12 also is acceptable, but more than 15 prism diopters of residual esotropia may require another surgery, and which will be maybe 6 months after the first surgery. Frequent follow-up for amblyopia is required, and sometimes if they have a DVD and may develop DVD later on, then we need to operate again, and the surgery that is done, and there is a surgery, inferior oblique weakening procedure are different categories. One is recession, one is anterior transposition. So if there is inferior oblique overaction Along with DVD, then we do anterior transposition. Now let's come to the other uncommon types. One is nystagmus blockade syndrome. Suppose a child is having nystagmus and the nystagmus becomes less intense when the child is converging. So that may lead to esotropia just because the child is putting too much of effort for the dampening of the nystagmus. So, and this can be associated along with phase turn also, because if the sometimes the null point may be convergence and a phase turn, that may be the null point of the nystagmus, so can be associated with phase turn also. And sometimes they may require bimedial recession for the nystagmus dampening. Now the next common one after infantile esotropia, the most common is the refractive accommodative esotropia. Now it's very important that we understand the difference between infantile esotropia and accommodative esotropia. The most important difference is the age of onset. Infantile esotropia will start within the first few months of life, and accommodative esotropia generally starts by 2 to 3 years of age. And it initially it starts with an intermittent near angle and near angle more than the distance. Like when the child is doing some near work, then the squint starts appearing, and almost invariably associated with high hyperopia. And once you give full correction, the squint disappears. And in these children also, amblyopia is common, but it is a better prognosis as esotropia. Because why? Because the first 2 years of life, the child is seeing straight. So by that time, he has developed a good stereopsis and binocular vision. And when the accommodative esotropia occurs, it occurs for a limited period of time, because generally infantile esotropia tend to get more neglected than accommodative esotropia because of the acute onset of the symptoms. So a growing child and suddenly the eyes start deviating, the parents get panicky and they bring the child for a checkup. So that is why also the prognosis is good. Now, how do we manage it? Good alignment, equal vision in both eyes, which will be done, good alignment will be done with spectacles. Equal vision in both eyes will be done with spectacles and patching. Good binocular vision anyway will achieve it with alignment of the eye if it is done immediately after onset of the problem. So definitely full cycloplegic correction in all esotropias, that is the rule. So don't deviate from there. Any esotropia, whatever cycloplegic value you get, full correction has to be given. Amblyopia has to be dealt with. Is there any role of surgery? Sometimes yes, because sometimes some of these children have a partially accommodative esotropia. What do we mean by partially accommodative? That when we correct, when we give the full correction to the child, full hyperopic correction, then the squint improves, but it doesn't become ortho. So in that case, the surgery has to be done only for the residual squint over the spectacles, not for the squint without the spectacles. And parents have to be explained clearly that we are correcting only the squint that is appearing with the spectacles on. Otherwise, they will be very unhappy after surgery when they see the residual squint without the spectacles. So that counseling is very important when we are doing a surgery for a partially accommodative esotropia. Now, a non-refractive accommodative esotropia. This, in common terms, what we have discussed yesterday is the high AC by A ratio. Again, in these children, what happens? There is esotropia, there is hyperopia, and the distance of for the squint for distance is different from the squint for near. Suppose, for example, distance squint is measuring at 30 prism diopters, the near will be 45. So when we give the full distance correction, then that gets ortho for distance, but near 15 remains. So in these children, it is always very, very important to give a bifocal executive or debifocal bisecting the pupil, so that even slight for near vision, the gaze is generally downwards. So whenever if it is bisecting the pupil, then always the child will see through the lower segment of the spectacle, and then that time that residual 15 will also get corrected. And bifocal addition is always +3 over the distance. And what do we do later? We keep on following the child as the child grows older, and slowly where that high AC by A ratio component may go, and distance and near may start becoming the same, and then gradually the near power addition is reduced and the child is weaned off the bifocals. So again, management is full correction, amblyopia treatment, if any, bifocal I've discussed already. Bifocal specification must be emphasized. Many times the opticians themselves don't know what we have written. They will make either a normal bifocal or they may call from the shop itself that as to what is to be done. So it is important that in the glass prescription itself, we draw the bifocal line, that it has to be at this level. And partially accommodative, we have already discussed. Then comes acute comitant esotropia. Sometimes it is also called acquired esotropia, that a child who is absolutely normal and no refractive error, no component of accommodative part, and develops esotropia. Ocular motility is full. Any abnormal presentation like that, even for example, uniocular nystagmus, these kind of situations, you should always suspect something wrong in the brain, especially the comitant sudden acute onset squint, and sometimes squint which you cannot explain with anything. In those cases, neuroimaging has to be done, and they may be associated with hydrocephalus or posterior fossa tumors, and surgery may be required for that. Now, if you remember the first slide, what I had told, why is esotropia important? Because it may be vision threatening and occasionally life threatening also. This is the situation in which esotropia becomes life threatening. And sometimes, rarely, it may be associated with retinoblastoma also. So again, that also is a life threatening situation. So any child with esotropia has to be taken seriously. Thank you so much. Now we'll go to the questions.
I'd like to request Dr. Kunal to please see the questions in the chat box and also initiate a dialogue with Dr. Love in this connection of esotropias. Dr. Kunal, you are there?
Kunal, your mic is off.
Dr. Guna, please.
I think the presentation was so lucid and simple that I don't think any PGs will be having any questions, because everything was explained. The bifocals, when
How
to do surgeries in infant
ratio. See, I'll suggest you read up, because again that formula is a bit complicated. But for practical purposes, suppose for practical purposes, if you have this thing, a distance and near disparity, and maybe 15 prisms or more, then it is a short case of high AC by A ratio, and then we can give the bifocal. Cyclic esotropia. Cyclic esotropia, sometimes there is a incidence like suddenly the esotropia occurs for some time and then disappears. So In these cases, still the angle stabilizes. We don't do anything, but it is always better to do a neuroimaging and rule out if there is anything. Difference between isotropia and DRS. Anyone who has understood this, can you answer? I've explained it very, very clearly. So someone of you would have understood. Difference between infantile isotropia and Duane's retraction syndrome. Can anyone tell? Yeah, you can TRM. You can just unmute your mic and tell. Yeah, answer is come like if it is due to cross fixation. See, few things are common both in esotropia and Duane's retraction syndrome. One important thing, one very misguiding aspect of infantile esotropia is the cross fixation. What you will see that both eyes are crossed, both eyes are inward, and when you binocularly check the ocular movements, there is no lateral movement in both the eye. So you may get confused that it is a Duane's retraction syndrome. So how do you rule that out? You just close one of the eyes and then check the ocular movement separately, and then you will see that lateral movement is full in infantile esotropia. While in Duane's retraction syndrome, most commonly one of the eyes will not have lateral movement, and on medial movement in Duane's retraction syndrome, there will be retraction of the eyeball. Inward eyeball will go inside. Which book do you read on strabismus? Kunal, can you advise?
For their level, I think Pradeep Sharma is better.
Yeah,
At
Pradeep
PG's
Sharma
level.
is very good. It's very good. You go through Pradeep Sharma. ESO
One question.
sometime, ortho other time. Tell me, Kunal.
They're asking what is the full cycloplegic? Full cycloplegic means the value which you get after atropine refraction.
Atropine or
We use one
cyclopenicillin.
thing I want to make it. Yeah. Atropine ointment should be used, not drop. That one questions will be asked in exams for PGs.
Is there any difference in prescribing refractive correction for all ages and all hyperopic power? Means we can give full correction in all cases. Yes, if it is associated with esotropia, any age group, you give full power. The Kapil, you are getting confused. See, what we like if a child is having a hyperopia, and suppose if we are getting a hyperopia of plus 1.5 in cycloplegic refraction and there is no squint and the child's vision is normal, we generally don't prescribe any spectacles to them. Children with hyperopia and without squint, we generally deduct 1.5 diopter from the full cycloplegic value what we get. While in myopia, we give the full correction. So that changes in esotropia. That 1.5 margin we will not give to that child, will give full correction. I hope you understand from this. Dr. Vishwanath Pratap, can you just make it, what is your exact question? I think I've answered this just now. Distance correction done. Nothing. I don't. Myotic, Kunal, do you use myotics?
No, sir. No, sir.
These
It
are
has no
all
role.
for theoretical purposes. We don't use it for accommodativity. See, logic of giving myotics is that if you give myopia with the myotics with the pinhole effect, you will have a good vision. Not that accommodation will not be required for near vision. But again, these are not practical things to be done. And again, a long-term use of pilocarpine. First thing, it is not that effective. Second, long-term use of pilocarpine itself is a problem.
And for accommodative, bifocal is the standard mode of treatment.
Mm.
Distance and near you calculate and can gain.
Age of surgery, I told in the presentation, maximum up by 2 years of age, latest by 2 years of age. Limit, what is that question, limit?
Age limit he's asking. Should be before 2 years.
And how much microtropia? Again, 8 diopters or less, we even up to 10 diopters, we don't do anything. But more than that, you keep a close watch. And if it is 15, then there is no confusion at all. You have to do it again. Myopic esotropia, you mean pathological myopia. In pathological myopia, the eye becomes so large and heavy that due to the weight of the eye turns inside to get adjusted in the orbital socket. That is called, maybe that is what you mean. That's not
myopic esotropia, heavy eye syndrome. It is also called heavy eye syndrome.
Yeah. Microtropia, yeah, good question, Preeti. Microtropia, again, sometimes what way you will have that in children you will find one eye amblyopic and no obvious squint, and even in the cover test there is no movement at all. So there is no anisometropic amblyopia. So we have to find a cause for the amblyopia. So strabismus gross esotropia is ruled out, anisometropic is ruled out, ametropic is ruled out, and still there is amblyopia one of the eye. Then in that case, what we do is a 4 prism base out test. So what we do it base out, no? Base out we do.
Base out.
So we slowly bring the prism in front of both the eyes. And in the amblyopic eye, there will be no movement at all. But when we bring it to the other eyes, the better eye, that eye will move inward little bit and then again have a recovery and fix again. So that difference between the normal and amblyopic eye confirms the diagnosis of microtropia. So once it is diagnosed, then we do it as then you do it, a normal patching therapy. Microtopia versus monofixation syndrome. Kunal, I thought both are same.
Both are the same. So microtropia and monofixation, there is a relative scotoma that develops. Because of that relative scotoma around the extrafoveal part, there is a relative scotoma. Because of that, vision drops. And 4 base out prism, that test is only to detect that relative scotoma. When the image falls on the relative scotoma, there will be no movement of eye. This way we diagnosed microtropia and monofixation by 4 prism test.
Any more questions? What is the first step in squint surgery? I'll ask from yesterday's thing. What is the first step in squint surgery for people who followed yesterday's presentation? Yes, very good. FDT. And mechanism behind crowding phenomena. The isolated what that is one of the theories for amblyopia, that if you give a separate uh, target rather than the crowded targets, then in separate targets the performance is better. Double Maddox rod, again we have not been doing practically, so it's a bit difficult to. I will have to read it up. I can tell you tomorrow.
Double Maddox rod is generally done for cyclotropia. Whenever there is a torsional effect, we do double Maddox rod test. Maddox
Any
rod
rod, superior taper.
yeah, superior obliques. The Maddox rod is a cylindrical that rod, and in the Maddox rod we put in double Maddox we put that Maddox rod in both the eyes, and then we rotate assign a pen torch yellow light, and that yellow light is perceived as red, and patient tries to fix that light because he will be seeing two lights, one straight from the right eye and the other from the left eye. So he has to just make it parallel. This is double Maddox rod, and the degree of turn we note on the subjectively on the trial frame.
Anything else? No. Esophoria, question is, should we treat esophoria? No. If there is no amblyopia, first thing, esophoria will not have amblyopia. If there is amblyopia, diagnosis will not be esophoria. And if it is there, it need not be treated. Why prism bar is not good for squint measurement? There are two differences. One main reason being the accuracy. See, prism bar has very crowded prisms in a very small length, so measurement may not be accurate, but it can be used. It is not that it cannot be used. The difference between prism bar and loose prisms, when you do the measurement, in the prism bar, your surface, the posterior surface of the prism bar will be parallel to your brow, but in loose prisms, the base of the prism will be the perpendicular to the brow. So that is important when you are using these two devices for measuring. Pathology behind cyclic esotropia, some of you only can tell. I'm not aware. In alternate patching, how long to patch the eye, and where and when should we follow up? See, normal in children, you cannot give, especially in infants, you cannot give a very prolonged duration of patching. So what I do is generally I give 2-3 hours of patching daily, and so that the child is able to move both the eyes in all the directions. So to avoid cross fixation, that is more than enough. How long till the surgery is done? Do you remember reason for cyclic esotropia, Kunal? No, there is no obvious reason mentioned in the book for cyclic esotropia. How much difference? Someone who had attended the refraction class will know about this. Generally, what I have seen, maybe 1.5 2 diopter of difference may lead to amblyopia, anisometropic amblyopia in hyperopes. In myopes, it is much larger, maybe 4 to 5 prism diopter difference then only. But in hyperopes, even a small anisometropia can cause amblyopia. Vision testing in nystagmus, again first class. Vision testing in nystagmus is most importantly done binocularly. First is binocular vision is the gold standard for children with nystagmus. I get very irritated on my optometrists when they don't mention a binocular vision in nystagmus children, because uniocular, when you are checking it uniocular, the nystagmus increases and we get a false poor vision. Actual vision is better than that. And also when you are doing uniocular vision assessment, then use the Spielman occluder, the translucent one. So when you are using the translucent occluder for vision testing, then the results are better. So binocular vision and uniocular with Spielman occluder. What do we do while doing surgery after hooking medial rectus muscle when we get oculocardiac reflex? First thing what you have to do is to relax the pull over the muscle, and it happens quite frequently in general anesthesia also. When you have pulled the medial rectus, then heart rate falls, and as soon as you get to know about it, just release the pull, and that itself will take care. And sometimes our anesthetists give atropine injection that time so that it doesn't happen further. Anything else?
Kunal, you wanted to ask a question in the beginning. Okay, go ahead.
It depends on what prism you are using. If you are using prism bar, then the posterior surface of the prism bar will be parallel to the brow. And if you are using loose prisms, then the base of the prism will be perpendicular to the brow. That means the posterior surface will be slanted compared to the brow. The base will be perpendicular to the brow. Dr. Satyajit, you were telling something?
Dr. Kunal wanted to ask you a question in the beginning, so I thought
the question is, I've already asked the question. The presentation was so lucid and simple that it is very clear to PGs, I think.
Questions are very good. I would say questions what all of you are asking are actually you have read it up. Anything else? Are glass prisms usually represent? No, I don't. Is glass prism available? I don't know about that. What we use is plastic material. What anesthesia do you prefer? See, earlier we were using, now most of the good places they use sevoflurane, gas anesthesia. Posterior no. Oh, acha, older children you are asking under local anesthesia, peribulbar.
So I think that's the overview of the subject that we have for today. I would like to thank Dr. Love, Coach Gave, for the beautiful presentation that he made on esotropias. Tomorrow and day after, 2 more classes of Dr. Love Coach Gave are remaining. And then from next week, there will be other teachers. Tomorrow, Dr. Love will be talking on exotropias. And in the last class, he will be speaking on special kinds of strabismus, which will be very interesting. Dr. Kunal will also be with us tomorrow and day after. And once again, I would like to thank Intas for making this all possible. You will have the video of this also. Those who have written me an email yesterday, I'll send them the YouTube link today. And I hope all of you are benefiting. As I asked yesterday, if you have particular topics on which you would like to have a class, otherwise we have already planned the entire panophthalmology gamut for you. Thank you, Dr. Love. Thank you, Dr. Kunal. And thank you, Intas, once again for this beautiful class. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sir.